Hey, this is Paul, and I get a lot of questions online where people send me photos of their branches and ask what type of dragon fruit did they get for free. So let's talk about how to identify the most common types of dragon fruit cuttings. So first, let's go up here to Hyloceras undatus, which is the white flesh dragon fruit and that red to salmon color skin. So this is a sample, this is called Neitzel, and you can see that it's gonna generally have a few spines and it's gonna be horny on the ridge here, which is that kind of brown stripe. Now, there are lots of variations between Hyloceras undatus, and this is grown throughout the world, most popular in the Philippines and Central America. And you can see just how different that Hyloceras undatus is compared to this one, which is Vietnamese Jaina. So you can see it's a different shape, but again, that 3 spines, horny, and the kind of a thicker branch. This is an undatus. So this is what I consider probably the most common dragon fruit cutting when people ask me questions and say, hey, what type of dragon fruit cutting is this? I want to grow it. It's usually Hyloceras undatus. Now, these can also look a lot like hybrids where people will cross, say, a guatemalensis, which is the second most common here, I would say. This is a Hyloceras guatemalensis, and these tend to be self-fertile. You can see there's branches and some flower buds on this example. And this one will be a little more prone to rust and cold. But these are great. These are probably my favorite tasting varieties. You can see what's unique is the heart shapes, and they'll have anywhere from 3 to single spines, and they're usually a single spine, as you can see here. So that single spine. But if you're looking carefully, often you'll find it will be 2 or 3 at the base, and it will fade to 1 spine. So this one is really easy to tell, especially you could just see, I call it, that it looks like heart shapes on the bracts. So those are the first 2 common ones. Let's head down to something really unique. This would be a more Ocamponus trait here. This is actually a hybrid. This is black dragon. You can see it's got a flower bud with some little hairs coming out in this beautiful purple color. So this is a cross of 2 different ones, but one of the parents is really spiny. So this one down here is probably an easier one to identify, like let's say Trisha over here, and this is Hyloceras ocamponus. And you can see that it's a really spiny bugger. Now these are self-fertile and they are really cold tolerant. And you can see you have to be careful. So a Hyloceras ocamponus definitely has unique traits. It also has a powder that you can see on, if you come around here, Scott, over here. So you can see this powder, and that's actually to prevent water from causing rust and damage like that. And I also think it provides some sun protection. So you can see how horny it is, the number of spines, the structure of the spines, the length. And so this is a very different variety. That's going to be red flesh, tastes kind of like a sweet beet with a really beautiful, huge flower.
Does it have this brown ridge characteristic on all of them?
I would say on most, it might be a different to a varying degree. You could come and see its parent. That one was crossed with Hyloceras undatus, and this is one of the parents. This is El Grullo, and this is Ocamponus. So sometimes the horniness will be, it takes time to develop. It may take a season or 2, and it does vary. Also the spines vary. Look at this one. This one has even longer spines. And the growth tends to be green, but it can also be red. And these tend to not be my favorite one. These are more healthy, although I've given away quite a few fruit and people are enamored with this. They say it's delicious. They actually like to freeze the fruit, and they say it's like a sorbet. So those are some of the most common cultivars. Let's head up the hill and I'll show you some more. So here is another one. This is Hyloceras costarricensis, and this is self-sterile and a red-fleshed fruit. Now, really big, beautiful flowers. This example here is Caslau. You can see it's spiny. And these ones tend to wake up a little bit later, but they also will fruit later in the season. And this one's just waking up here. It's just getting some new growth, as you can see. And this tends to be a really sun-tolerant variety in my experience. Although it can be a little cold, weakness to cold, it tends to rot. So you can see I actually had a little bit of rot on this one. I left it right here, and that's due to cold. But sun-wise, I feel like this does great in its full sun spot in this location. And this one is a great kind of really healthy one. A lot of the frozen red flesh dragon fruit comes from the costarricensis. Now this is a hybrid of most likely guatemalensis and undatus, and you can see the hybrids start to get tricky. Does this one look more like a guatemalensis, or an undatus, the white flesh that I showed you earlier. So that's where it starts to get in between, and this actually makes a purple colored, purple fleshed fruit. So this one is Maria Fusia. So really great aggressive grower. I don't see any flower buds on it yet. Now here is one that does not grow very well in my climate. This is Pallora, yellow skin Pallora. And this is actually a Selenocereus megalanthus DNA. Now it's just waking up, and these are actually all grafted. So I grow them grafted. I've had no luck growing them in the soil. They rot out, but I might get some fruit this season. We'll see. You can see I have some new growth here. But the traits on this is the spines are really sharp, and they're actually more painful than any other ones in my experience. These ones are just really stout, I would say, and they can really get you. So Desert King is a hybrid of this one, which is absolutely delicious as well. Now come down here, I'll show you a Hylocereus polyrhizis, which is similar to the red fleshed Costa ricensis. So here is a Costa ricensis. This is San Ignacio, as you can see. It's very similar to the Caslau. And look at the shapes of the thorns and the distance between them. And then now let's look at a polyrhizis, which is similar. But these ones, this is in Trinidad, it gets a bit more red, but that's not always the case. But just notice there's a longer distance between the thorns. So both are thorny, both are red fleshed, both tend to be self-sterile. So if you're growing these or cuttings that look like these, you definitely want some different varieties to cross-pollinate. Okay, here's another unique type. This is Selenocereus setaceus, and you can see it tends to be a darker green, and it'll have 1, 2, or 3 of these spines. And this is similar to sugar dragon. Look at the new growth. It's going to be a little red on the top and green. And just so you can see the kind of overall structure of these branches tend to be just thicker, greener, with these really intense spines that will get you if you're not careful. So sugar dragon, voodoo child, and more, those are popular. Selenocereus setaceus. If you come up here, here's some other popular ones, which are Asunta, and that was Guatemalan, I believe, crossed with a Sternopterus early on, and this is Axe here. So Axe has a nice little fish hook. You can see it will have 3 spines, 2 or 3, but the spines tend to bend back. It's not horny, and you can see the shapes of the bracts. So this, an Asunta 2 or Axe, or possibly Asunta 3 kind of looks similar to this. And then you can get some really funky ones like this hybrid. This is a beautiful one. This is Yala, which was an Ocamponus crossed with something unknown. And this was by Leo Manuel. So I'm really excited to see what this one ends up. It has some unique traits. You can see it does put on that powdery coat down here. And it's really a dark green. So something like this is a no ID for me because I don't know the pollen source. So I just call it Leo's Yala X. So it's Ocamponus, and if I had to guess, I would maybe say a white flesh and then Datus hybrid, but I'm not sure. So sometimes it's fun to just have no IDs and just see what they become and see if they taste great and have beautiful flowers. So hopefully you learned something about some of the different types of dragon fruit. As you can see, there are hundreds of different cultivars, and there's at least 14 different species. Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm going to show you a cheap and easy dragon fruit potting soil mix. Now, this ratio came from UC, California, from my friend Tim George's dad, Mike George, and their citrus farmers. Now, what they used years ago was 1/3 peat moss, and I use Armory certified peat moss. You can see the difference. Wet is right here on the right, and it's dry here on the left. So it does look different. I like to pre-moisten it before I mix it. Up next, sand, 1/3 sand. And sand is not all sand is alike. I tend to use the ones that say it's safe for potting soil. Like down here, I get this at Home Depot, inside near the concrete, and you can see it does recommend using it for potting soil or garden applications. Now you don't want to breathe it, and you could even wash it further if you wanted to. I don't wash it, it does fine. And the third that they use is humus or humus. Now it's really hard to find humus, and what that is basically composted green waste that is decomposed for about 6 months to a year and is fine, and it has some good wood chip particles. And this is what is in most potting soil today, and it can cause problems in the long term. So using these 3 ingredients is going to be a great mix. I actually am using this now just to root my dragon fruit cuttings, because it seems like the dragon fruit, they really respond well to wood chips and compost that's green. So this stuff is a good ingredient in the short term, but if you want a long-term solution, instead of using composted green waste, you can substitute that third for some of these other ingredients. Now, before I show you the other ingredients, this is what the final product looks like. It is really nice. It's a good potting soil, good drainage, and you could even use more sand if you wanted to. I mean,
so that's the finished one?
That's what we're calling the UC mix.
And he doesn't put any perlite or anything in that?
Nope, just this. And Tim George has had success using this to root his cuttings, and no problems inside that greenhouse that we visited. Now, what I like to use instead of the compost for a longer term potting solution, because we have gophers and I don't want to have to repot these for at least 5 to 10 years. So I substitute the compost with the following ingredients, and you can use what you want or what you can find or see fit. So this is chunky coconut coir, and it's got to be the chunky. Don't use the fine stuff. That will cause rot because it's too fine. So I like to substitute my compost with that, or inert growing medias like pumice, which is here. I really recommend volcanic pumice. It's a great growing media, provides plenty of oxygen and aeration to the roots. And then if you like perlite, you can use perlite, but not all perlite's the same. I tend to only use the larger stuff. This is number 4. The stuff you find at Home Depot is really, really fine, and it'll just kind of float to the top. So this is not the ideal perlite. Honestly, I would, if I don't use number 4, I would just use only pumice. So I like bigger perlite. That's just what my preference. Now, this is really good stuff. You could use worm castings. Honestly, if you just wanted to do 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 sand, 1/3 worm castings, that would work well. Right now we're using just pure coconut coir and worm castings as an experiment on some of our pots, and that's been really successful as well. So that's another option. Now, a lot of people are using charcoal or biochar nowadays, but what Gary Matsuoka recommends at Laguna Hills Nursery, he says about, I think it was 2 to 3%, no more. So using a maximum 5% for biochar, I do like it. It's really pricey, so that's a drawback, but I do have a source that's nearby, so I can access it pretty easily. And so if you use all these ingredients like I do, this is my final mixture. And you can see the differences. So this one would last 3 to 5 years. If you use worm castings a lot and treat it right, it will last longer. And then here's mine, which should last up to 10 years, but you do need to top dress it with nutrients. So watch some of our other videos on how we fertilize our dragon fruit. We're gonna do some more videos this season on that. And this is the media that I prefer. However, after talking to Tim George, I am using more compost to root my dragon fruit, because he feels that having some of this matter like here kind of promotes the hormones in the plant to root faster. Obviously, temperature is the biggest factor for rooting, but this is working well, and I've had success using both of these methods so far. So there's a cheap and easy dragon fruit mix. It just won't last quite as long. And then there's one that has more expensive ingredients, but will last you probably twice as long if you treat it right. Greetings, fellow dragon fruit growers. This is Paul, and today I'm going to show you how I root young cuttings. Now, ideally, you want a nice mature cutting like this 8S here that's really thick, has a nice core there, it's really developed. But sometimes you're going to get something like this, which is this black dragon. You can see it's a really young, immature core and soft, kind of leathery. This is not ideal, because that's going to be more sensitive this winter in my climate in zone 9B in Southern California. So here's another example. This Medusa is really immature. So you want to be really careful with how you root these, because they're definitely more sensitive and less forgiving than a mature cutting. So let me get started. Let me show you how I'm rooting these this season. Let's go into the greenhouse and I'll show you my simple steps to get these things to thrive. So there are several different strategies you can do to root your dragon fruit cuttings, but what I like to do this time of year is just use regular potting soil, as you can see. And I barely put it into the potting soil, and I tie it up onto some a bamboo stake, and then I water the flesh, just like that, really lightly without getting it too wet. And I just do that a few times a week, and I tend to get roots in about 2 weeks. Now this season, I'm working with Vermistera, and they asked that I try this out, and I'm actually dipping the cuttings in Vitality. You can see here I have this little bucket, and I just soak them in there for a few hours, and then I do the same thing that I just showed you. Here's a really tender Kathy Von Aram. And so what I like to do is just slightly put it in the soil, tie it up, and again, just spray it ever so lightly a couple times a week. And that's been really successful for me. You can see here in the greenhouse, you could do this outside under a tree as well. You don't have a greenhouse, or even on the side of your house that doesn't get sunlight. And I just let them stay here where they get very little direct sunlight, no, actually none. And I just let them sit here for a few weeks, and you can see, you can do a pull test, and the roots are starting to develop on all these. And as they root, I put them over here where they gradually get more sunlight. You can see I even have a flower bud on this rooted cutting here, on Yala number 1. So what I like to do is the pull test. Once it's rooted really well, then I'll actually take it outside and slowly introduce it to more sunlight. So there you go. That's what I'm doing this season to root dragon fruit cuttings, and I've had 0 issues with rot. It's been 100% successful with actually all sorts of different plants you can see here. They're all using the same potting soil. So this is how I'm fertilizing the dragon fruit now. Honestly, you can just top dress with this. This is Dr. Earth's Flower Girl Bud and Bloom. Hopefully you've seen our video on that we did last season. And it's really, really a great organic OMRI certified fertilizer. So honestly, you could just top dress your dragon fruit with this. But now, this is what I'm doing. I'm actually using Fox Farm, which I believe Gary described it as the Cadillac of potting soil, but it's best for top dressing. So what I'll do is I put a little bit of Fox Farm potting soil into a 5-gallon bucket, and then I mix with Dr. Earth's Flower Girl Bud and Bloom.
Yeah, Bud and Bloom was told to us by Leo from Oceanside Dragon Fruit,
yes.
right?
Yeah, you're right. Don't breathe it. But I mix it up really well, about 50-50.
And he said he liked to put this on in the spring, right? To make his dragon fruit bloom, right?
He did it twice, and the second time was by June, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
But basically, right when the dragons wake up, I top dress with this. And then, again, right in June. I'm actually prefer to do like first week of June. I'm a little behind this year. But once it's mixed up about 50-50, this is what it looks like.
Okay.
And so now, here's Paul Thompson's 6S, very important variety, and it needs some extra nutrients. So I just top dress near my drip irrigation.
And I'll water it in.
And I water it in the same day. So that's more than enough. I usually do about 2 handfuls per pot. And hopefully we'll have some more of these flower buds. As you can see, look at this beautiful missing variety, Paul Thompson 6S.
That's gonna open soon.
It will. And there's actually another one here. So we want plenty more, and we want this growth here. What I'm actually noticing is after I fertilize it the way I just showed you and water it in a few times, they're much greener plants. You can see there's a little stress, a little yellowing on this one. So as soon as I apply this fertilizer, these plants get a nice, beautiful dark green, and they're much happier. And they tend to shoot flower buds as well. Hey everybody, this is Paul, and today I'm going to show you how I build a permanent dragon fruit trellis. I use concrete, rebar, and 4-inch drain pipe, and I'll show you all the steps, and I'll show you why. I mean, you can see how sturdy it is. I have one of my hybrids here, and these things just don't break. You can see here it's 4S, and it's just something that's very permanent, a permanent solution, because we get some winds here, and I don't want them to fall over and get top heavy. So you can see here's the older design, Spicy Exotics design. And this is where it's in a hollow 4-inch drain pipe. And what happens is in time, they just bend over. And you can see after a few years, I did these in 2019, they almost just kind of flex at the base. So I had to start using a bamboo post to keep them level. But as the plant gets heavier, you can see it just bends more and more and more. And so this is not a good long-term solution. And I don't want to use wood because I just want these to get really large and just hold hundreds of pounds.
So you've iterated these dragon fruit trellises a bunch of times. So what version are you on? How many times have you reassessed how you made them?
Probably like 3 or 4 times. I've tried 3-inch drain pipe, which I thought was a little thin. And I noticed that 4-inch drain pipe is better because I can put 4 cuttings in a pot. So this is a 20-gallon pot, and I put 4 on a 4-inch drain pipe. It seems to work really well. I have some 3-inch drain pipes down there, and they're just too narrow. So that 1-inch larger diameter is key.
Maybe we can put all the parts in the description.
Yeah, we can do that, no problem. And so let's go through the steps and I'll show you how I build these. Let's go get started. Okay, so step 1 is selecting the correct location. So I'm about 7 to 10 feet from other pots. And most of my trellises are about 10 feet apart. Some are about 7 feet, but that's the minimum.
So how deep are you gonna go?
I go about 2 feet. So step 1 is you want to dig a hole about 2 feet deep, and I expect to use about 100 to 120 pounds of concrete.
Okay.
So let me get this dug, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, I have the hole dug, and this is my tool of choice here. And what I buy is 1/2-inch rebar at 10 feet. So this is a 10-foot piece. I cut it with a bimetal cutting blade, and then I use it to cut a 6-foot piece, which will be the main spine, I guess you could say, main support, which I'm about to hammer it into the hole. And then these will be the cross beams. So that's why I like to buy 10-foot sections, because I don't have any waste. And then I use 1/2-inch drip line, and I sheath it. So that way, you'll see why, because that way I can remove them from the top and interchange them or move the plants. So I have the rebar, I hammer it in until it's about 4 feet in height. Try to keep it centered and level. That looks about good. So it's about 4 foot, 1 inch. So 1 more hit. There we go. Next up, this is the 4-inch triple wall drain pipe. And I cut this to a 6-foot piece. You can see it's too tall. So now I'm gonna trim it back just a bit. And I usually go 1 inch beyond the rebar. So the rebar is 5 feet in height. So now I'll cut this 5'1". So 61 inches. I'm using that same metal blade. And there we go. Next up, I put a 4-inch cap, and I use this drill bit. It's a unibit. I go straight through. Let that whip you in the face. I try to make it a 90-degree angle. I just eyeball it. Sometimes I go through the cap twice, but usually I just go right under it. And there we go. So now I have that done. Now it's time to get to the concrete. So let me get the concrete ready and show you the next step. So what I like to use is the fast setting concrete, and I'll use anywhere from 100 pounds to 120 pounds per pot, per trellis. And the reason why I like
How many bags is that, like 2?
2, a little over 2, depending on the hole. But usually 2 is plenty. And what I like to do is mix it up really well. It's definitely too wet there.
Yeah, you don't need much. You just need a bucket and some water.
Yep.
And a stick. Nice.
Don't want to breathe it, by the way. It's really bad to breathe the dust. And I like to have it kind of like consistency similar to cake batter.
Like oatmeal.
Definitely more on the thinner side. So next I like to fill up the base first. Probably could just dump it. Use the rebar. Just get any of the holes, air hole pockets out of there.
Gonna work it in.
And again, this is fast setting, so it'll set pretty quick. You want to make sure it's nice and level before the concrete sets. That's very important. And it does set pretty quickly. Then I like to use the rebar. Ooh. And that'll kind of help keep it where I want it to. I think in this case, probably something like that. Okay. There we go, nice and level. And you want to check that a few times. And just fill it up. Makes a very cool sound when it plops down. And it takes about 1 bag to fill up this concrete drain pipe. It's around 50 pounds of concrete.
Yeah, once you do this a few times, it gets pretty easy.
Yeah, and you want to pull that rebar and get it in the center. Okay, so I filled it up, and now time is of the essence. So the first step down here is the concrete. You want to make a nice level base. That way it'll prevent any gophers from entering the pot. And you'll see I'll cover this with some dirt and allow the roots to grow into the soil. So having a nice level base is really important. Like that, there. Now, I'm gonna double check, make sure it's still level. Yep. Perfect. And now you don't want to wait too long. Before it hardens. You don't want it to harden, that'd be bad. Just put the cap on. And then insert these straight through. And this 1/2-inch drain pipe, drip irrigation line, excuse me, is key because it acts as like a sleeve. And so as it cures in the next hour or so, I'll just turn it like this every so often.
And it'll just form your mold so you can put that in later.
Makes the perfect mold, exactly. Let's make sure it's still level. It's the most important step. Yep. And so now, over here, you can see what it looks like when it's done. So, I've added the dirt, the concrete pad is still under there. And then now, I'm gonna finish the top. So you can see that these will still go in and out after it dries relatively easily. So sometimes it's bent or curved, so you might have to flip it over, but there we go. So you can see how easy it goes back on. You can see for the 20-gallon pot, I like to drill a lot of holes. And I put that nice open center in it. Put it down. And then I like to use this wire mesh. You can buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's. Comes in a big 8-foot by 4-foot or something like that. And I think I make 4 out of them on each piece. So I cut them and tie them down with zip ties, and it looks like this over here when it's done.
And then you add the burlap.
Yep. So I like to build the top, and then I add plenty of burlap around it.
Why do you add the burlap?
That way the aerial roots will have something to grab onto. I've seen some people use sandpaper to make it more rough, the PVC, and you could do that as well.
Okay.
But I prefer to just let it be and put plenty of burlap on it. And I just use some larger zip ties, or you could use wire or twine. And there you go. Next step is I like to form a little base of perlite. So I add perlite about 4 inches and then put in potting soil and it's good to go. And so after a while, I'm gonna redo all these, that's down this whole row. And I'll show you what his Laverne pink looks like when it's all said and done. So something like this. And then time, some of the older ones will just get those aerial roots and really just...
Yeah, you have an example of the aerial roots?
There's some here.
You can see how they're going
Some of my
into the
older
burlap.
pots, I've moved most of them, so not in this section.
That's a good example.
Yeah. And there you go. And they're sturdy. They can take a lot of weight. And I don't have to worry about them falling in the winds or anything. And I couldn't be happier. So I'm getting rid of all the white ones, and they're all going to be 20-gallon black pots. And you can see I've probably done 80 of these already, or something like that. 50.
You're experimenting so other people don't have to.
Yep, so that's been working really well for me. I'll never have to deal with rot or have any problems.
Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm going to show you how to apply Sluggo Plus to prevent bugs from eating the new growth on your dragon fruit plants. So first step, you're going to identify some sort of problem. And you'll see here, look, see the top is totally eaten off of the new branch from the season. And you can see some of these have healed because I've killed the pests, but these are the scars that remain. So these branches are going to be a little bit distorted as they grow due to that damage on the early growth of the season. So once you identify the problem, you want to purchase your product and buy Sluggo Plus over Sluggo, because you can see that pill bugs and the earwigs are bad bugs as well. And we have tons of those on our property. So your second step after you identify the problem is to make sure you remove weeds from the pot. You can see the difference here. I still have a bazillion weeds to weed whack, but over here I've weed whacked all around the pot, and that's where the pests like to be, under the pot and around it. And if you have weeds inside it, make sure you weed the pot itself. So now that you've seen that and you've weeded, it's really easy to apply. Now the part that kills them is not the iron. It's actually something called spinosad or spinosad, and it's a natural soil dwelling bacterium, and that's what kills the insects. It kind of dries them out. So you can see there's two sides to this. I like to use the one that has the holes like that. And then you just make sure it's not going to rain, and make sure your soil isn't too wet. This is almost too wet because I watered yesterday, so I'd usually wait another day. But that might also attract the snails and slugs to come out. So just apply it. Make sure you apply around the pot like this as well. And just do a nice little circle, kind of like landmines. And then when the snails or the slugs or the pests come around, they're going to interact with it and they're going to die. And you can see all the dead snails here if you look carefully. Sometimes they stick on the pots, sometimes they're hidden on the plants, but they'll just shrivel up over time. I thought I saw some more over here. And so this plant, this one I treated just recently. You can see there's a deceased snail there. So this product works really quickly, but you can see the difference. I've totally lost on this Mr. Wu. I've lost several new branches here on the canopy just from pests. And after just one application of Sluggo Plus, you can now see this healthy growth here. Greetings, fellow dragon fruit growers. This is Paul, and today we're going to talk about aphids. If you could see them right here on this flower bud, they are having a little party there. Now, they can be found on flower buds, on new branches, on new growth, and they really like to be right here on the bracts of fruit. And you can see the Argentine ants are protecting them and harvesting their honeydew. So they are pretty vile pests for dragon fruit, and once they get on a few varieties, they really start to spread quickly, and that can be really annoying. And I believe that if it gets bad enough that some of the flower buds could abort, maybe something like this, if I don't treat it, you can see all of the aphids on there, quite a heavy amount. And look at all the ants on my fingers too, and hands. You can see the ants are just going crazy. So what I like to do is use this water and soap treatment, and you can see I just blast them and it takes care of them really, really quickly. So this is Dr. Bronner's Peppermint Castile Soap. And sometimes I have to spray them twice. One or two times usually does the trick. And the key is that you want to do it in the morning or in the evening. Now, ideally, the best time to do it is to spray in the evening. And then if you really want to protect your plants or care about them, you can blast them with water the following morning. That's what I like to do. But honestly, as long as you just spray them and give them a good spray like I just did, that's going to take care of most of the aphids here. So on this whole plant here, I'm going to go ahead and spray all of the flower buds and the fruit really well to make sure even the new flowers or the new fruit that just was pollinated, it's safe to spray those fruit as well. You can see I have it really bad here. And so something like that I might spray twice. But again, you just want to spray. Look at this new growth, or even here. See them all? So I've learned that you really want to treat this quick before the ants spread it to all your other varieties. So I'm going to go through this whole plant here and spray it pretty well. Now let me show you how I mix this. Let's go do that now. Okay, so this is how I mix the aphid spray. Now I use a 32-ounce spray bottle. It's filled with water. And then I use the 18-in-1 hemp peppermint pure Castile soap. It's excellent stuff by Dr. Bronner. Now you can get this at Target or on Amazon. That's where I got it. And I've seen it at a lot more stores these days. Now the key is you don't want to add too much and you don't want to add not enough. So I eyeball it and I add about 3 to 4 tablespoons. Seems to work really well. It's a good ratio. So there we go. It might have been a little bit much, but it's going to be just fine. And then insert your spray nozzle and give it a good shake. And now we are ready to go kill aphids. So there you go. I hope you give Dr. Bronner's Peppermint Castile Soap a try. You can apply it onto your fruit right up to harvest time. It's organic. It's a great, great product.
Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm going to show you how I prune back a mature dragon fruit. Now this is over 3 years old. It's an unknown variety, and I got it from my friend Linda Nickerson at Elk Creek Dragon Fruit Farm. So we call it Unknown Elk Creek number 1. Now this last winter, you can see it's had some damage here. And honestly, if I was in a rush to get fruit, I wouldn't prune a single branch here. I would just simply clean this off and try to kill it with hydrogen peroxide. But in this case, since it has so many branches, it's been neglected, I haven't pruned it for a year, I'm going to do some pruning. So first up, make sure you clean your pruning shears really well. And this is just rubbing alcohol. Clean them, sanitize them once per plant. And then I'm just going to remove this whole branch. So this one, you can see there's still some active cactus rest. The darker it gets, the better your plant is responding to it. It's dying off. So there's some of that. This one's kind of half and half. I mean, that's on the fence if I wanted to just leave this one alone. I think I'm going to leave that one, but I'm going to remove some of these and get some more airflow. There we go. And then I saw that there was one that really needed some attention here. This is a really long, mature fruiting branch. You can see these two probably got it the worst. And the reason why is we had a lot of rain and cold, and this is where the sun is hitting. So we're getting a lot of the early sunlight on here, and that can damage these as they come out of dormancy. So I'm just going to remove this whole branch very carefully. It's spiny and heavy. And then for this one, now that it's warming up, I'm actually going to do a flesh to stem cut. I'm cutting it at a 45-degree angle. There we go. So there's some more that I'm going to remove. Now again, if I was absolutely in the need of having as much fruit as possible, all these branches would bounce back, in my opinion, and produce some fruit. But in this case, I want to get more airflow, more sunlight to this part of the plant. You can see it's just really massive. And when at all possible, I tend to do node cuts, as you can see. Now in the case of this branch, you can see there's a little bit of
damage here, but the plant's fighting it off really well. I could cut it off like that. You can see it's not very rotted. If I leave some of the nodes, it'll still produce fruit. So that's another method I like to do on some of these plants that just barely have some infection. I could also spray this with hydrogen peroxide as well. I don't have any at home at the moment, but that would tend to produce a callus quicker. So as I come around over here, you can see that this is already darkening. This one is looking not too bad. I think I will remove this just because there's so many branches here, and I want to again improve airflow and look for pests. Also, when I prune off really big branches like this, the plant responds to the wound and usually starts to kick it into some growth here. Now you can see I'm going to also just cut off a few of these branches here, flesh to stem cuts, just because there's a little bit of rust damage. I'm still going to get plenty of fruit and flowers on this canopy. Also, part of my logic of removing this is when I mow or weed whack under here, I want to have some space. So I'm kind of just giving it a trim or a haircut. Now last up, you can see here, these branches are healthy, but even early on this time of year, towards the end of March, I even will just do what kind of Danny Loftus recommended, is just tip just the tips like that, just a tiny bit, and that will respond with some growth here, as you can see. So I'll tip a few of these, just a tiny bit, see if we can get some growth response, and hopefully we'll get this to have some nice new branches here, and then in a few months, have some flowers and fruit. So there you go. That's how I tend to treat these more mature dragons, giving them a haircut. There might be a few more branches I may prune here just to improve airflow, maybe something like this one. And there we go. I think this plant is ready for spring and summer. So that's what I do with some mature dragon fruit plants that are about 3 years old or more. Give us a like and a subscribe. We'll keep them coming. And you can see I have this one to prune now. Here's a Guatemalan. I'm going to do the same, although most of these branches are fine. I would say I'm going to probably remove some of the ones that are sticking up, that are kind of up too high, because if they produce a flower or fruit here, it may break with the weight. So I'll give it a little haircut, but mainly it's just going to be these ones that are really up, sticking up too high.
Hey, this is Paul, and today I'm going to talk to you about the must-have varieties that you want to get early buds and blooms. And number one is going to be a sugar dragon or a voodoo child. I'm going to call it Selenicereus setaceus hybrids, or 8S. And here's a great example. This is voodoo child from UCNR. You can see a flower bud here. It's one of the earliest ones. And then I have another 15 or so coming in right now. You can see 2 on this little 2-sided branch, and then a bunch popping here and starting to pop here. And these are always consistently the first to bloom for Scott, me, and most people. And again, it's the Selenicereus setaceus DNA. So easiest and most common would be a sugar dragon. So that's the first variety you want to grow. They kind of are slow to start, but then they'll really start to take off. And then this is going to be your pollen source. So this is self-fertile, and they call it the universal pollinator. You can see there's 4 new buds that are popping up here today. They weren't there yesterday. So this is going to have a nice flesh. Here's 2 more right here. You can see as the thorns get kind of dark, that's a hint that a bud or a branch is going to bloom on this variety. Now, after you have a Selenicereus setaceus, I recommend sugar dragon, or again voodoo child, 8S. You're going to want to get a Guatemalan. So Hylocereus guatemalensis is going to be the second variety to open up early, and this one is a Nicaraguan red. Now this one, the skin's a little thin, but it is tasty, and you can see it's already having its first flush here. So these tend to be a bit more sensitive to the cold, and oh, there's some nice new buds here. And this, you'll see, you'll get a nice mixture of branches and buds on these more mature plants. So these are the first 2 varieties you'll want to start growing, in my opinion. Will be a Guatemalan. I would recommend American Beauty, or this Nicaraguan red is another good one. Let's go up the hill and let's go show you some other ones that are of the similar species that will also be early bloomers. Let's go. So Paul Thompson was definitely onto something, because he crossed a setaceus, this one is Houghton, with a Guatemalensis, which is Rixford here. Now, Rixford is a little cold sensitive, Houghton's a little spiny, but the offspring were great because they are sugar dragon or Arizona purple, probably. I think this one's the same as Voodoo Child. And you can see it's got a bud here. It's another early blossom, one of the first to bloom. And then, if Scott noticed already, Sugar Dragon's having its first wave as well. And I've noticed that these are slightly delayed because they also get more shade. So this is a different section of the yard, it gets more shade. So notice that these Sugar Dragons are blooming slightly slower than the Voodoo Child you saw down the hill. Looks like that might be a bud to branch, but it is awake. And then here's Neon, which has not woken up yet, but this one was moved last year. It's a really old plant. And people keep asking me to do a video on all of these. I will when I have flowers and fruit on them, hopefully this season. Just really quick, I would say that Neon tastes slightly better than Sugar Dragon, in my opinion so far. I really like it, but the fruit tends to be smaller. Now, you can see a bunch of other Guatemalans here that will be early bloomers. This is G1, not much action here, but this G2 already has some flower buds. Here's one and another one. And again, this is the Guatemalan variety, Hylocereus guatemalensis. And this is similar to American Beauty, which is another great one that's going to be an early bloomer. And then going down, you can see here's another G2, we have G3, and then this is another more rare Cetaceous. This is Leo Manuel. He crossed 7S with Neon. So you can see it hasn't woken up yet. It's a little slower than Sugar Dragon and Voodoo Child, but I'm interested to see when this one makes some flower buds. And here is Paul Thompson's 7S, which is the sister of Sugar Dragon 8S, but you can see I do not have any flower buds on it yet. It is sort of a younger plant, so maybe next season it might be an early bloomer, so we'll see. So those are just a few of the varieties. Oh, one more, Condor. You want to see, Condor tends to be a Guatemalan that's an early bloomer. You can see here's its first flush, and this plant's not even very large. So that's Condor, really delicious Guatemala. So I recommend those two cultivars to start with, or I should say varieties, Hylocereus cetaceus and Hylocereus guatemalensis.
What's up, dragon fruit lovers? Hey, tonight we have a sugar dragon bloom, and I thought I'd film collecting some of the pollen, and we'll pollinate it as well. And I'll show you how I do that. Now, some people use a bowl, but I like to use a coffee cup. And you're just gonna simply take the lip of the coffee cup and put it on top of the petals here. And then you're going to just simply take like a paintbrush and push the pollen sacs towards the cup. You could be a little aggressive with the flower. I mean, it's really only going to last one night, so get your pictures and everything in your video if you want to take some, and then don't worry about damaging the petals after that. We're just going to get our pollen. This does take a little bit of time, but you know, you don't need a whole lot, but I like to get as much as I can. That's pretty good. And then you're just going to simply take a paintbrush. We're just going to dab the end in here. Boom. So this is actually the female part of the flower. And then this is the male part of the flower right here. I hope it stays in focus, but it might not have. But you just want to go ahead and dab that. Do it a few times if you want. And that's it. And that is pollinated. And we also got another surprise here. This is actually the 6 blooms on one branch right here, but only 3 of them are gonna go full bloom tonight. So we still have 3 more buds that haven't opened. There's one on the end. But this thing's really cool. You can see the backside. It started to tilt over because it's so heavy. And it's really interesting because all the buds formed on one spine. It was 6 there in a row. So I imagine the other 3 will probably open up tomorrow. but look at this. So amazing. So we're gonna go ahead and pollinate these. I got some pollen there on my brush and just gonna give it a little dab. You really don't need that much. You just need a little bit of pollen to go down this tube here, and then it's good to go. Should be good to go. Then you get something like this right here. Boom, fruit set. So let's get the other ones. Boom. And then there's another one up here. We'll get that one too. And this is sugar dragon, so this is self-fertile. So you can use its own pollen. And you actually want to collect this pollen. This is the first plant for me to flower this season. So I'm collecting a ton of sugar dragon pollen, and I'll just use it to take care of all my other dragon fruit. I'm just collecting a big bag of it from all these flowers. And we'll just mix it up. Boom. All right. That's how you do it. Very awesome. All right, well, I'm going to collect a little pollen here, and then I'll come right back and show you all the pollen that I got from all these flowers. There's all the pollen, you can see it. It's quite a bit actually. That's from 4 flowers. It's honestly enough pollen to pollinate like 100 dragon fruit. There's so much there. You can see all these little ants. The ants just absolutely love the flowers. So you might have to deal with those when you're pollinating. I also want to talk about the aroma. Oh my gosh, they smell so good. The dragon fruit flowers. I know the old school growers know this, but for you new growers and the ones that haven't had a flower yet, get ready because they smell awesome. So what's up, dragon fruit lovers? Hey, check this out. I'm doing some pollinating early this morning, getting these sugar dragons done, and I'm having to compete with the bees. I actually got a few questions earlier this week. People were asking if bees do indeed pollinate dragon fruit, and I'm here to show you they do. I guess the thinking is that since they open at night, the bees wouldn't be around, but they do come in the morning, and they come pretty hardcore. They really love it. So I took a few minutes of footage so you guys can check this out. All right, have a good day.
Greetings, fellow dragon fruit growers. This is Paul, and today I have a tip. Now you can see that I like to remove the spent flower bud off of the fruit after it sets fruit because I think it looks a lot prettier and cleaner. Now there is a drawback. You can see that Cynospina's had some ants go into the cone, and that can happen sometimes, especially as the cone starts to split. So another option is that you can actually cut the flower like I did here. You can see. So I leave just a little bit after it's set fruit. You can see the fine line there. And that way, the flower that's decomposing isn't going to get onto the outer flesh of the fruit and mess up its appearance. And now this is some double protection from pests. So I'll show you how I do that. You can see here, this fruit, it's just too fresh. It's only been, I think, 2 or 3 days, so I let it be for a few more days. You want to find something that has had a little bit more time for the fruit to develop, like this one, see? So I could pull this off, but now, for some added protection, I'm just gonna cut it right there. Just like that. And so doing that, now it will dry out here, and now it'll have a second layer of protection from, as you can see, the Argentine ants that are pretty much everywhere and in all the plants in our yard. Greetings, fellow dragon fruit growers. This is Paul, and today I am going to review American Beauty. Now this beauty is 0.8 of a pound, and I got the plant from my friend, the late Leo Manuel, so I believe that it's an excellent source. Now, this is one of the plants that was evaluated by UC Irvine's UCNR, and I believe the data is accurate in terms of harvest time and BRIX score and appearance of the plant. Now, you can see that they said that they got it from Florida, and the original source is Pine Island, as you can see here. And what makes this story even more interesting is that there's actually 2 sources with evidence. First, Chris Rollins said that he collected it in the Guatemalan highlands and gave it to Pine Island. And also there's evidence that Quang Ong Self-Fertile went to Pine Island as well, which could possibly be the source of American Beauty as well. So it's possible that both were cuttings that were mixed together because they're so similar in appearance, or that one of these is the true American Beauty, or maybe both of them are. Now on top of that, local farms in San Diego considered G2 and American Beauty the same. And you can see here's a few different Guatemalan varieties, and you can see just how similar the fruit looks. This one's Condor here, and this one is my friend Leo's eBay Self-Fertile. So let's focus on American Beauty and let's see how it tastes. And it's just a beautiful fruit. Look at this lovely, lovely flesh. Now they will get a little larger over a pound, but 0.8 of a pound is a nice sized fruit. See how it smells? Slight aroma. Smells like a typical cactus fruit. Nothing too spectacular. So let's go ahead and test the BRIX score and see how sweet this thing is. And in case you haven't seen me do this before, what you want to do to get the most accurate BRIX reading is that you want to get your sample from the center of the fruit. And you do not want to use any of the flesh of the fruit, just the liquid. And that's how you get an accurate reading. Try to eliminate the bubbles too if possible. Okay, the moment of truth. 16 5/10. Now you can see I had a smaller fruit just the other day off the same plant, and it was BRIXed in the 18s. So I guess I could have left this one on a little bit longer. But no matter, let's give it a shot. Absolutely delicious. The texture of it is nice and smooth. It's juicy. I describe it as refreshing. Man, just a lovely fruit. Definitely in my top 5 varieties to grow. So if you could only grow 5 varieties, I would highly recommend American Beauty. I give it a 9 out of 10. I love this fruit. You can see the skin is not too thin. There's a nice flesh to seed ratio. You can see there's a lot more flesh than seed. It's just delicious. Kind of reminds me of watermelon and some berries. A very nice, juicy, flavorful fruit. Just delicious. So that is American Beauty, and that's some of the history behind it. The only negative aspect I could think about is that the plant is a little sensitive to cold, but if it is a mature cutting, it's gonna do just fine. So it's more of those younger branches are a bit more sensitive in my experience. And you can get a little bit of stem rot in that with that variety as well, so be a little careful. But that is the variety American Beauty. Give us a like and a subscribe. Have yourself a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you'll get to taste an American Beauty fruit soon.